Hi, and welcome to the channel. This is a very special video we're going to be taking a look at today. First of all, hashtag sixfanarts. Yoshi wins is the title of this one. It's a reference to the sixfanarts challenge going through Instagram right now. I was a little bit slow getting the last one finished up here, but here it is, the final 6. Now again, that's pretty significant, but there's a reason I'm also kind of toting this as a very special video, and it's because this is officially the 100th video that I'm uploading to my channel here. So something of a special event, and we'll be taking a little bit of time to talk about that, but first just a little piece about the picture that we're kind of looking at today. Now, Yoshi comes from the Mario universe, so it's something of a compliment to the Mario piece I did a little bit earlier, but because I did something that was so very rooted in a specific video game, I thought I'd try something a little bit different with a little bit of a unique spin on it as well. What I mean by that is that Yoshi obviously comes from a game, but I decided to go a little bit more specific and put him in the Mario Kart universe. But I didn't necessarily want to go that full video game aesthetic like I did with the previous Mario picture, a few videos ago. So a few videos ago with the Mario picture, everything had very repeated patterns and things like that, just to be very reminiscent of the Mario video game that he comes from. But with Mario Kart, I wanted to do something a little bit different. I didn't necessarily want to go with that same aesthetic. Now, as far as the composition is concerned, just to be kind of transparent and upfront about it, the background or the environment that they're in actually comes loosely from a video game cover for the Mario Kart game. But I did switch some things around. So the Yoshi character is something I kind of put up front, and it's kind of my own original kind of take on the drawing. Mario holding the turtle shell in the background is again a little bit unique. I kind of made up that composition my own, but the background, the environment that they're in, is largely kind of borrowed from a video game cover, mostly because I had a lot of struggles here trying to get this perspective right. This was meant to be something that was, trying to show some given motion. These people are racing for the finish line, so trying to convey motion in a still frame is really kind of tough, and I went online and kind of look at how the experts did it, and it was pretty easy just to kind of look up the Mario Kart game and see some examples. Now, the covers for these games are done by these really great graphic artists that do, special things to kind of try to enhance that view of motion that they're trying to convey, and I copied off of it loosely. So one of the big things that was done here is that you don't have a flat horizon that goes just straight from left to right. It's set up on a tilt a little bit, and that way when you get your curves in, indicating that you have something of a oval type track that they're going around, it conveys a little bit more motion. So there's a reason that horizon is kind of sent askew there. Hopefully kind of pulls off the effect that we're going for. Now, there's a very cartoony take on this, not a lot to kind of speak to in terms of really in-depth rendering or anything. So it's really just a matter of taking a look at this and figuring out how you would puzzle piece it together with layers. So we'll have a background layer that's just going to be that flat blue of the sky, and then we'll have some of the bushes and the buildings kind of sitting in front of that. We'll have the road surface in front of that. Mario is behind Yoshi, so he'll kind of sit up front a little bit, and then in front of everything, Yoshi, and last but not least, the very kind of forward-facing layer that kind of sits in front of everything is the little kind of ticker tape finish line that kind of marks the end of the race, and we'll kind of see that kind of pop in at the end there. So let me just switch gears here for just a moment and talk a little bit about this 100th video kind of phenomenon that's going on here. It was something of a milestone event, at least in my mind, so I wanted to do something a little bit special. And in my 99th video, the one of Wally, I'd made something of an announcement saying that I wanted to try to get to 100 subscribers, and that anybody that subscribed in the time frame between when I published the Wally video and this, the 100th video, I would do something of a random drawing and give out some free artwork. Now, in that time period, I had one new subscriber. So that one new subscriber is going to be the person that receives some free artwork. If you are KMX78, please take a look at the description. I'm going to put some instructions on how to get that free artwork, and you can contact me via email, and we'll make some arrangements that way. So having said that, congratulations, KMX78. Thank you for subscribing. And for everybody else, it's still not too late to subscribe. I'll be doing some more kind of giveaways like this in the future. But more importantly, this is a pretty small, humble channel. So any effort you can make to try to help me out is really appreciated. And that comes in the form of subscriptions, sharing, comments, and of course clicking on that infamous like button as well. So please don't hesitate to do it. It doesn't cost you a thing. I promise I won't harass you with a bunch of emails or anything. I'm just trying to grow the channel. So shameless plug out of the way. Let's go ahead and we'll move on and continue talking about the drawing that we're seeing here. Now, if we move on here, you can see that the line work is kind of going in for the final rendition of the background with one kind of weird little thing I've kind of done here. I took it off the frame here for just a second, but as I'm putting in my final inks, I made some decision here on the bushes that sit in the background. Now, again, we're not seeing them on frame right now. I've hidden the layers so I can work on some of the other layers of line work. But the thing I'm going to point out, you'll see in just a moment. When we get to the point where I'm starting to do the color rendition, I have the inking in for those bushes in the background, but they are set on their own layer. And the reason for this is because, aside from the fact that I like to work in a lot of layers, I didn't like the way the ink turned out on that bush. And I know that somewhere in my little brush library in Procreate, there's something in there that has a texture that will give me something of a mimicry of leaves or just the bush look that I'm going for. So these inks really were very sloppy, and it's because I knew that they weren't going to stick around. Once I started getting to the coloring portion of this piece, I was going to use that as something of a template or a guideline, if you will, as to where I wanted to use the textured brush with all the bush type texture in there. But once that coloring kind of got put in there and that effect was rendered, that little piece of inking layer was just going to get deleted. So again, it looked a little bit sloppy compared to everything else, but it was only because it was going to be a temporary placeholder and something of a guide for a little bit of a trick that was going to get pulled later on. So we'll see that effect in just a minute or so. In the meantime, we're just kind of finishing up the inks. Now, as I'm doing the inks here, let me also point out what's happening with the wheels. Wheels are a tricky little thing to kind of draw in perspective because they're round depending on what angle you're looking at them at. Sometimes straight lines are important depending on what angle you're looking at. And in this case with Mario, I'm trying to get this effect here where he is trying to stay on the track that he's driving on, and that means that he's kind of moving forward, but also his front wheels are turned, kind of facing camera, so you see that effect that he's kind of coming around the bend and coming towards the camera. So the back wheels are drawn at a different angle in perspective than the front wheels. And it made it a little bit tough to try to imagine how that was supposed to look if you were going to go for some sort of a realistic version or realistic rendering of what those wheels would look like. So again, those back wheels, you can see the side of the tire with a little bit of that hubcap showing, but because the front wheels are turned towards camera, you don't see it from the same view. That perspective is a little bit different. And even though the figure of Mario is a little bit tiny, it might be a little bit hard to see, the front wheels and even the back wheels to a certain degree, the top and bottom lines of those tires are just slightly curved to give you the hint that it's rounded and turning and in motion. The motion idea here is a tough thing to pull off, so it's done with a couple little tricks. Number one, that rounding effect, and also how the light and shadow are going to be rendered a little bit later on with some lines to generally kind of convey motion. So here we are at the bush piece right here, as I mentioned before. Notice how I deleted the line work on it and basically just kind of kept in this brush texture. Once I got the brush texture in, I put in a kind of an overlay of some shadow type brush texture over it, and then just blurred the whole thing, because again, the idea here is that this all is in motion. So we'll have our cars and our figures kind of in focus, but our background is going to get out of focus as you know, the motion of the cars comes towards us. Again, it's just a trick I'm trying to pull off to create something that really doesn't exist. 3 dimensions and a 2-dimensional space is part of it, but also motion in something that's flat and ultimately not really giving to kind of conveying motion. Textures was really kind of an important thing here. So even though I don't necessarily use specific brushes for specific textures, I did want to make sure that there was just kind of something in the bushes to give that, and then complement it with some sort of a roughness on the road surface to give you this idea that they're not driving on just some perfectly pristine black top, but more of a paved asphalt type road surface. There are other aspects of this drawing that were so smooth and textureless that I just kind of felt like the texture on the road surface breaks it up a little bit, gives it a little bit more interest to the eye. And again, the background with the buildings and everything like that is just kind of so smooth and lacks texture that I felt like it was kind of balanced out by the texture on the other side of the piece with the bushes and the road surface. It was subtle. It was just kind of meant to kind of, again, give a little bit of visual interest, and then the smoother textures, that cartoonish, lack of like a realistic, photorealistic texture, doesn't really kind of come in with the figures there, so we can kind of keep that cartoony and move forward with the piece. Now, even though we're not rendering a whole lot of texture in our figures and in the little go-karts they're driving, it doesn't mean that we still don't have light and shadow to deal with. So, as you probably can already tell right now, as I go through my coloring phases, I'm basically just working background to foreground, and we'll get into Yoshi in a little bit, but for right now, we've got our sky done, bushes, buildings, road surface. Mario is getting cleaned up right now. And really, again, just a matter of kind of getting that cartoony effect in. So putting in these big, bold shadows that would be a little bit more subtle and probably a little bit more faded if we were doing something that was a little bit more photorealistic. Now, there are some soft shadows and some hardline shadows here. There is something of a mix going on. And the best way to kind of figure out which ones you want to kind of keep soft and which ones you want to kind of keep as hard lines might be best kind of addressed through photo reference. So again, for the Mario figure, even though its original drawing, there isn't really a specific drawing in this angle and in this particular pose anywhere online. I did use reference photos of Mario from Mario Kart in order to be able to get the drawing that I came up with. So I did see some pictures where Mario was driving a cart. I just created a new pose for it. But that doesn't mean I couldn't be informed by how the shadows and the lights were playing off the drawing that I was using as reference. So, if I wanted to understand what kind of shadow I wanted to put under the brim of the hat, I could go back to my reference for that, even though my shadow might lie in a slightly different place based off of how I've kind of composed the position of the figure. Hopefully that makes sense. But the point I'm trying to make here is that reference is just kind of really important to a lot of the work that I do. Even if I'm not copying something literally, which I very rarely do. Even in original compositions and original poses and things like that, I try to use some sort of a reference of a similar pose or an actor or a model in a similar position to help inform where the shadows and lights are really kind of best put in there. Again, not necessarily as important when you're doing these cartoony types of work like this, but when you get into pieces that I've done like Wally, that was really important. Wally was an original pose, but a lot of the reference to where the rust spots were and where the scraping and texture of the weathering on his figure were concerned, that came from reference photos from still frames of the movie. So, it was informed by something, and I think that kind of helps you get that rendering a little bit better is if you have something of a truer reference to kind of work off of. A great example of this might be Yoshi, and for that case, Mario's nose. There is a shadow there, and there will be a light source put in as well, but it's very kind of faded and kind of blended in. It's not a hard line. It's a soft, kind of subtle blend between the mid-tone and the shadow. Why that and not a hard shadow? Well, it's mostly because of reference photos I found from the video game. Again, not necessarily in this position, but in the close enough position that it was pretty easy to guess that a shadow belonged there. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Whereas my light source, it's coming from the upper right-hand corner. That's where the sun is, and it plays down, lays light on the top of the nose, and then there's the shadow underneath. Again, both on Mario and on Yoshi. Now, the tire rendering is a little bit interesting here, too. Again, we're trying to kind of convey some motion here. So I'm putting in my light source, painting it in, then I'm using the smudge tool to kind of smudge it a little bit to give it something of a faded look to it, at least on the edges. And then I'm going back over it a little bit later with a darker line. It's actually my shadow color, and putting in just some really, really faint lines to give you that impression that there's tread on this tire, but that tread is in motion, so you can't really make out detail. So again, it's really subtle, and hopefully just kind of gives you this idea that these wheels are turning and in motion and give this whole thing some visual interest. I'm coming up on the end of this here, so I'm going to kind of finish up this whole piece just by kind of talking a little bit again about the 100th video. So we're going to have a ticker tape that will kind of come in at the end here to kind of show the finish line for a race. And the finish line in this case is not going to say finish, it's just going to say the number 100. So this is a direct reference to the 100th video here, something I'm pretty proud of. It took an enormous amount of work to kind of get these amount of drawings done, and I've really only been working on this channel for since October, actually November maybe. So it's only been a couple of months this channel's been active, and I really feel like it's an enormous amount of work to get done in such a short amount of time. I'm going to take a little bit of pride in that, and I hope nobody kind of faults me for it. But to kind of commemorate the moment, I wanted to make sure that there was something very visual on the channel that kind of marked it, and hence the 100 there as the finish line. So it does represent the finish line for the race, but also the finish line for the piece itself and for the channel. That doesn't mean I'm not doing more videos. I got more to come. So at the end of this one, let me just kind of say thank you. Please don't forget, take a moment and subscribe if you haven't done so already. More artwork is coming. I've taken a short hiatus, but I got a lot of artwork coming in the next couple of days or so to kind of catch up for what I've missed over the last couple of weeks. Stay tuned and hope to see you again soon.